Good afternoon and welcome to Stages of Freedom. And ladies who lunch. Our mission is to record, archive, and share conversations with these three remarkable women. I'm Rob Dimmick, along with Ray Rickman, co-founder of Stages of Freedom. Our guest today is Mildred Nichols, a woman of wisdom. At 92, Mildred is an activist, educator, political leader, and mentor. She is wife to the late Dr. Charles Nichols, known as the Modest Professor, founder of Afro-American Studies at Brown University, where he served for years 1969 to 2007. Mildred, in 1974, was on the Women's Political Convention and gave a speech called "Who and What is a Political Party?" In 1976, as a delegate to the Democratic National Convention, the Providence Journal wrote this article, "Rhode Island Delegate in Thick of Action at Convention." And in 2020, she was in a feature article in the Rhode Island Monthly. Please welcome Mildred Nichols.
Hello, everybody.
How are you, Mildred?
I'm fine, thank you, Ray, and I wish to say hello to everybody who's listening.
Well, and I'm sure they're saying hello back, even though they're muted. Now, only one voice can be heard at a time. So, I'm going to ask you a question and I'm going to be quiet because we've all come to listen to you and your life experiences today. Every time your name comes up, I listen to the response. Sometimes it's just facial. The level of respect that you have gendered in this community is just enormous. How you pull that off?
Well, I'm sure I wasn't setting out with some strategy or technique or something of that sort. When you use the phrase "pull it off," I don't think I pulled it off. And I'm very grateful and respectful of other people's opinions of me, but I didn't try to pull it off. I think you just try to do good things in the community, and I've been blessed to be surrounded by everybody who can be just so wonderful. And so I'm the beneficiary of a lot of wonderful things just by being with other people who are doing.
Now, do you consider yourself an activist?
Well, I consider myself, I look at my life as going through different phases. And there was a time 50 years ago when I was a feminist activist and doing things of that sort. And I've gone through the years doing things. When I was involved in Democratic Party politics, I was definitely on the activist side of things. Now, in my old age, I consider myself more of a supporter of other people, like the different organizations that I am a part of, particularly my sorority, where I serve on various committees and just help the younger women out with all the work that has to be done. So I look at my life as going through different phases.
So we're talking about the deltas.
Well, I became a Delta when I was in college. And so I've been a Delta for many, many years, over 70 years.
Wow.
And yes. So, yes. And we used to do the Ebony Fashion Show here in Rhode Island. And right now I try to help with raising scholarship money. And I'm on a book group of the Providence Presbyterian Church. And when Floyd was killed, we said we wanted to do something more than just say Black Lives Matter. So it was suggested that we try to raise money for the Delta Scholarship. So that's what I mean by being around people who really help me a lot.
Who are busy out in the world doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah. 70 years of Delta. Wow.
Yes, more than 70. 1948 to be exact.
Well, I'm always surprised that I'm of a given age, because I feel young, but it is actually good. And I said this the other day when we were talking with Rose Weaver. When you're my age, you had a chance to have lunch on a dozen occasions with Charles Nichols, and if I were younger, that wouldn't have happened. You would go to the Brown Faculty Club and sit down with this fabulous scholar. And just, I was very lucky as in the 60s, early 70s, to meet Arnold Rose, to meet Saunders Redding, I'd be here all day. I'm bothered because I never met Du Bois. He was 10 years too old and gone to Africa by the time I was meeting everybody. But you knew a lot of them, yes? Of those great people?
Yes, I did. I was lucky. A lot of great ones that I didn't know, but yes. And I must say, I frequently like to pull out my husband's books that he wrote and read them again, and just think about actually, all the things he had to go through really to get some of them published, because timing is everything. And if what you're writing about isn't something that the publishers think is a great market, they are likely not to say, no, thank you. So it took him a while to get his book on slave narratives published.
Which is a classic.
Yeah.
Now, I believe only two books have ever made me cry. And his, Langston Hughes, Arnold Bontemps letters did that to me. I'm sitting in bed one night, 11 o'clock, and I come to the end of the book and I break out crying, because you realize that Hughes has died. The letters aren't going to go back and forth anymore. And you talk about powerful, just the idea. And I asked the question, how much editing was done? Because a book, the letters are fabulous, fabulous.
Yes. Well, he went through about 2,000 letters and selected 500. And those are 500 in the book. And they are really fascinating letters. And I was interested to see that there are about 11 or 12 letters when Hughes and Bontemps mention our friend Saunders Redding, who also was the best man at our wedding, Nikki's best man at our wedding. But I love Saunders Redding's writings too. And I'm sure a lot of people have never heard of him, but he wrote some wonderful books.
Oh, without question. And
one of my
over the year, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of my favorites of his is his book, No Day of Triumph. And when he was making a tour of the South in the 30s, and his conclusion that though he had gotten a grant to do this, it certainly was no day of triumph. But I love the way he describes his two grandmothers who were very, very different. His maternal grandmother, his uh, paternal grandmother couldn't be two more different people. And the scene that he sets up where they are together at breakfast, the one grandmother was a mulatto who really was brought up really to feel accepting of the culture. The other grandmother had been a slave and had been hit by her master, and her ankle had been broken, and she walked with a limp, and she had a very flinty character, didn't and she really, I must say, she made no bones about how she disliked white people because of the way she had been treated. Yeah. So they're just one book. And when our first son was born, Saunders Redding had just put out a book, and in it he inscribed, I hope David will never have to live through this. And so I really love that inscription.
And, you know, we have a copy of all of those, and I'm going to run upstairs when we're done with this fabulous taping and read that.
Mhm.
You know, I don't think I ever told you this. At one of the Brown graduations, I'm coming out the gate, and through the gate is coming Saunders Redding. And I just stare at him and I say, "Are you?" And he says, "Oh, it's so nice to be recognized." And we sat down on one of those cement chairs and talked for 90, I'm sorry, we didn't talk for 90 minutes. I let him talk for 90 minutes. And, you know, just an unbelievable experience. But you must have had that experience with him dozens of times, yes?
Well, yes, yes, I did. But I always thought of him as a very kind of, he was very gracious. And the last time he was in our house in Providence, I remember he said, "Damn, I keep forgetting this." And so but he was very expressive. Really
So
was.
you were in Germany before you came to Providence.
Yeah. Mhm.
You had graduated from Hampton, and then, 20 years earlier. What? Bring us quickly through the 20 years. You graduate from Hampton, really great school, and what happens then?
Well, I got married. We had a child, and then actually, my husband had a Fulbright professorship at a university in Denmark. So we spent a year in Denmark. So our second child was 5 months old when we went to Denmark. Spent a year there, and that was my first time to really tour around Europe and get to see other countries in Europe. And of course, that was 1954, and Europe was still recovering from the war. But one of the things that struck me was how American English was superseding British English, and teachers were once commented that they were brought up on British English and their students were speaking American English.
Yeah.
So they were trying to resolve that issue. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And
then you came home.
Back to Hampton.
Yes.
From 55, and then in 59, we went to Germany.
Okay.
My husband accepted a tenured professorship at the Free University, so that's how I ended up in Berlin. We ended up in Berlin.
And you were there 10 years?
10 years, yeah. But we came back to the United States frequently to visit. And sometimes he came back to give a lecture or something of that sort. So, yes. But I was active in various German American women's clubs and things of that sort. And of course, we had our children in school. So I was a parent of children in school.
Your two sons, David and
Keith were the two sons. And then in 1965, our third son was born. So he was much younger when we were in Germany.
so you showed up here and we did the math. You showed up at Brown, and how old were you?
Well, we came to Rhode Island in 1969, so I was exactly 40 years old when we came to Rhode Island.
And then you told me about your short-term, really great job.
Well, I had various short-term jobs. The very first one I had was coordinating the Artists in Residency program for the State Council on the Arts when the Paul Taylor dance group was in residency. So that was to get the schools into performances. But that was a very short-term job. And I also had a couple of short-term jobs teaching Black literature. And then finally, I decided it was time to get a full-time job. And that's what I began working with a federal research project called the Career Education Project. And we were trying to figure out what women could do to enter or re-enter the labor market after having been out. And so what kind of materials did they need? How did they have opportunities to learn about the labor market? And just what kind of adjustments. So there was a lot of research being done on that. And in Rhode Island, there was a grant to give people counseling by telephone. We had to find out if that was a feasible way to, in fact, help people, if it could be done by telephone. And after the research project, the conclusion was that it could. And so we then did that for a while. And then in 1978, I went off to do something very similar, but not focusing on the telephone career counseling. So we were looking at how again, how labor market information could be utilized by students and counselors and workers who were trying to get into the job market. And we were looking at developing, when I say we, I mean departments of state government. And there was, of course, a national program as well, but every state had that kind of program.
So I think you told me there were 4 or 5 state agencies involved in this, including Department of Education, and I assume labor.
Right, and rehab and economic development. Yeah.
And that really ended up being your work.
What did you say?
That ended up being your work. What you did.
Yes, right. Yes.
I was surprised how long you were there.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was fascinating work. And I stayed in that job until I retired in 2000. So it's hard for me to believe that I've already been retired 21 years.
It happens, and I hope to do that myself one day. Um, I wanted to let's go back and talk about politics. So
Okay.
you show up, and Rhode Island has, everybody always thinks whatever decade they're in is the worst, but you show up, and there is this political system, boss system. And no one's ever really written it up properly, but almost every American city and some states have these boss systems with 1, 2 people in charge. And what did you do about it?
Well, I wouldn't say what did I do about it, but what did an organization called the New Democratic Coalition attempt to do about it? Well, all of this was an outgrowth of, course, the 1968 debacle in Chicago, where there was really a battle in the streets. And it was all about representation and how people could participate and who decided who was going to be participating. This, of course, is a never-ending battle. It's been going on forever. And we're still asking the same questions, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But in any case, in Rhode Island, this group, the New Democratic Coalition, decided that we wanted to try to oppose the delegates that the boss system had put up. And of course, there were candidates like Shirley Chisholm and George McGovern. And Shirley Chisholm, unfortunately, dropped out pretty fast. But I've still got my wonderful buttons from her. And so then after Shirley Chisholm dropped out, I became a McGovern delegate, and I won. And so I got to go to the Democratic National Convention. That was the 72 convention.
And I told you that I was there, and I was an alternate delegate in Michigan. And we weren't treated well. We could barely get in the convention hall. And Miami was 100 degrees. It was a mess, but it was a war on behalf of McGovern.
Yes,
and,
right.
I read in the paper, deeply involved.
Yes, well, I was inside in air conditioning, but yes, the issues on, the platform. I mean, there were other delegates representing plenty of other candidates. So getting the party platform, much to what I would say the more liberal, progressive, some would say radical view, was part of the struggle. So, but of course, one of the great disappointments for me was how miserably McGovern lost to Nixon in the end.
Well, they were able to paint him as somebody he wasn't. And,
I know.
And the press helped them. And,
Yes.
If someone says that someone's an axe murderer 10 times, even though they don't even own a penknife, they're an axe murderer. And that's what they did to McGovern. It was unbelievable.
And in some ways, that's what the press did to Jimmy Carter later.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, how many times have you met President Carter?
Only once.
Just one?
Only met him once, and only met Rosalind once, but he did appoint me to the National Advisory Council on Adult Education.
Right.
And one of the great things is we were sworn in the Roosevelt room. And that's the room named for the two Roosevelts, Teddy and Franklin. And that's where we had our first meeting, in the Roosevelt room in the White House. But we were looking at how adult education was functioning in the United States at that time and what changes needed to be made.
Well, I was, it's really impressive when you have presidential appointments. And I mean, it really is good stuff. And I congratulate you on it. And again, it's part of your work as well. I mean, not only prestige, but work.
Work, yeah, yeah. So,
So now you were the very first Black woman to go and vote for president.
yes, I was.
I don't mean in the United States. I mean in the State House. You were a presidential delegate.
Yes, well, yes, on the very controversial, of course, Electoral College. I mean, it has become controversial. People have we've always thought, is it the best thing? But I figured with all that happened this year, people who probably had never even heard of the Electoral College got a sense of the structure of our government. And so I think it's representative elections where the popular vote prevails probably would be more to my liking, even though I was an elector.
But you didn't have to, but you could have voted for anybody you wanted, and that's the problem with it.
No, in Rhode Island, I think you have to you vote for the person you're committed to.
Right.
That is,
I thought they did that later. I thought they just did that 8 years ago. I could be wrong.
Maybe not, but I know that the four of us who were there had no intention of voting for any other than Carter. So
it was fine. I don't know. This is getting to be president's like a 5-step process. And as you just said, most people are not really aware of that. And it could be tripped up as someone tried to trip it up this time. He tried very hard. So
yeah, right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll have to see what happens with that.
So you were
6.
You were also Democratic National Committee woman.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is big stuff, seriously.
Well, it depends.
Well, no, there are 1 million of us, and you got to do that, and 1 million didn't.
Well, we were still dealing with the same old issues, representation. And one of the issues, of course, is that prior to the 1970s, women were much underrepresented in anything with party politics. So that was a real struggle. And even the so-called liberal men weren't very eager to have, say, equal representation between men and women in party politics. So but it's great to see how much progress is inching along, both in elected positions and in policy positions. So,
well, the great thing at the Democratic Party is that the delegates are 50-50, in terms of gender. And twice when I ran to be a delegate, and I won once, and the other time I didn't, because the first congressional district got, I think, 7 males, and the second congressional district, Langevin's district, got 8 males, and however it went. And of course, I was the #1 loser. wrong gender in the wrong congressional district. And you just sit there, I try to be a feminist, and you have to say publicly, it is so great that almost always one more woman than man in the Rhode Island delegation. But it's hard to get elected because we've got an all-male congressional delegation. We need to change one of these days. And they get all those male seats. And so the other males are at a disadvantage. But you had a big role in that. You had a role in changing, delegates, because again, when I was a teenager, Chicago, all those places, 70, 80% of the delegates were men.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, conventions used to be all male if you go back far enough.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was only part of my life.
So you surprised me by telling me how early you were on the Rhode Island Black Heritage Society board.
Yes, and well, the society was founded in 1975, and I became a charter member in 1976. So I was on the board for many years, and that was a wonderful experience with digging up Black history. And I know you, of course, know a lot about that in Rhode Island, but Rowena Stewart, that our first executive director, was really an incredible woman.
Powerhouse. I know stories. She'd go to people's houses, and I have to get to be bold like that. She'd go to people's houses and she'd knock on the door. I'm Rowena Stewart, and I'm here to get your Black heritage items that you have in the attic or basement that you don't care about. And she'd walk out with boxes of stuff. And what do you mean your father was the first barber and nobody knows it? Give me that stuff.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yes, getting that wonderful collection together and the history. Well, on a much larger scale, of course, our new museum in Washington did the same thing, going around the country collecting materials for years, of course, before the museum opened. Yes. And as a matter of fact, my sister gave our ancestors' freedom papers, and they're on exhibit in the museum in Washington. And especially his box. He made a box to carry his freedom papers in.
Yes.
And yes, I don't know if you've seen it.
No, of course I've seen it. Isn't that something?
Yes, right. I thought to make that tin box.
There is some pain in all of this, though. I have the shirt that I wore with James Meredith in Mississippi, and it has a little spot of blood on it. That
bloody shirt.
Yeah, and I never cleaned the blood off. And I promised it to Lonnie Bunch. I promised it to the museum twice. And I now have it in a box, in a Federal Express box to mail. But I can't put it in the mail. So I commend you for parting with something that fabulous. I saw it and I said, this is fabulous.
Yes, right. Well, you know, of course, that they've got a warehouse full of collected items. So it's wonderful how people have shared things. My sister actually got to go to the opening because she was the one who actually had the papers, and she was there at the opening all day. And she actually willed herself to live long enough to get to that opening.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and so she was there with Oprah and all the other people of note and distinction.
And by the way, your gift was probably as valuable as some of those $1 million checks. I mean, really incredible.
Yes.
So,
well, of course, they ask me for money all the time. Of course, they have to keep raising money.
yes.
Yes.
Well, they'll have an endowment one day. And, I hope the listeners can hear this. Now, we are creating African American Museum for Providence, Stages of Freedom, because every state should have one. New Hampshire has fabulous African American Museum, and Massachusetts does. And we will before this year is out. I wanted to tell you, so you have been I see. Yeah, I mean, you told me all these boards and fabulous things. How long are you on OIC's board?
Oh my God. I'm sure it was at least 20 or so years.
Yeah.
More than that, probably. Yes. I was.
You were there in the beginning?
No, I think, let's see, I think probably not. OIC, I think, existed when I arrived in Rhode Island.
Okay.
It wasn't very old, but it had at least started, I think.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention Michael Van Leesten at this moment.
Yes, right. Michael Van Leesten and Reverend Harge, the founders.
Mhm.
And of course, based on Reverend Leon Sullivan's model coming out of Philadelphia, which is where OIC started. And so for some people may not know, but the building where the Providence campus of the Community College of Rhode Island is the OIC building. After many years, OIC was able to, in fact, build that building. And but in the end, with changes in government, federal government funding drying up, and never enough state funding to support training for minority students who were going into the labor force. OIC had no choice but to sell the building, and the Community College of Rhode Island, that is the state, bought the building. And that's where students who attend the Providence campus of OIC attend. Yeah.
So tell me, before we get to this, to family, so tell me something we don't know about you.
Oh my God. Well, I'm a very family-oriented person, and I love family reunions, and I love all the younger people in the family who really help me stay abreast of technology and all of that. And so I have my nieces, both on my side, and nieces from my husband's side. And then, of course, there are my grandchildren who are, like everybody would probably say, but mine truly are fabulous. And I try to take
when I got that text from you, I said, wow. When you had embedded the article in the text. And, I'm not sure I can do that. I was just so impressed. And that came from one of your grandchildren, or from one of your nieces?
No, what do you, I didn't really understand what you were saying.
No. So you sent me a text that had the Providence Journal article in it. And you know how to do that.
No, I did that. No, I did that myself. But
that's what I'm being impressed about,
But there's a lot I don't know. And you may not know it, but one of my young Delta sorors took your Stages of Freedom announcement and sort of modified the statement about me and put it on Instagram on our Delta website. So, and I thought, oh my, isn't that wonderful? So there's a lot that I would like to learn.
Oh, so you don't do Instagram?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And that's
Okay.
how I get to see, we have a lot of wonderful babies and 5 and 6 year olds in the family. And
Yeah.
that's how I get to see them nearly every day because because they are incredible little
Yeah.
children. Yeah.
Well, we
So,
live in interesting times, as they would say.
mhm,
So you have 3 sons,
yes,
and
I
they
do.
do, yeah, and they do what?
Well, I will go in chronological order. Uh, by training, my oldest son is a physician. And when Rose Weaver uh, was on, I noticed that she and my son graduated from college the same year, 1973. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, so, but by training, David is a physician, and he spent most of his clinical life on the faculty at Johns Hopkins Medical School in pediatrics. And in 2012, he left his endowed chair at Hopkins and became the president of the American Board of Pediatrics. And that board really oversees how doctors in pediatrics are educated and how they're keeping up to date. So he's been doing that since 2012.
Mm.
So he's in. So my regret, of course, was that he's now farther away. He left Baltimore for Chapel Hill, so it's a little bit more difficult to get to see him.
So
Yeah,
tell me about your
and
middles.
and then Keith, my middle son, um, lives in California, and he left Rhode Island when he saw that he wasn't going to get a job in his field, and which happened to be banking. He had gone to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy after college, and but he has been in banking, and right now he's in commercial banking. And he happens to be in a bank that you are very much aware of, being from Detroit, and that is Comerica Bank, which is a commercial bank that deals only with businesses. There are no residential customers. And so he does that. And I say he sells money. So that's my description. Making loans to businesses. That's
Uh,
uh, what he does to big businesses. Yeah.
yeah.
And my,
So that is a very popular bank in Detroit because they did a lot of the big financing for rehab. And Ford uses them as a bank. So they're just very popular in Detroit.
mm,
It's interesting to be a popular bank. Banks aren't popular necessarily.
yeah, right, right. Well, Keith does a lot with mentoring young students in the community as to what kind of career options they might have. And they give out little scholarships. I don't know if he would use the word little, but they give out scholarships as well.
Uh, uh,
And, uh, and my
little
third,
scholarships
mhm,
little scholarships are good if you give enough of them out.
yes, right, absolutely, absolutely.
Uh,
And and then my third son um, is in the government sector. He is a senior foreign service officer, and for the last 3 years, almost 3 years, he's been in Zimbabwe as the ambassador there. But his 3 years will be up this summer. Yeah, before that, he was in Peru. And I see some people on that I know have been to Peru. And one thing I can say, Peru was a lot easier to get to.
Then Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe, yes. So, but
But
Brian,
isn't that something?
mhm.
Every time I think about this, and I was lucky enough to meet most of the members of your family, but I think of what it is so wonderful for a mother to have such sons. Yes.
Oh, well, but they're such wonderful human beings. That's the thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
they're wonderful sons. Yeah. And of course, my grandchildren are really very active and involved. And Jason, my oldest grandchild, teaches at the University of Maryland, but he does a lot of uh, political commentary on TV, and he's a very popular speaker for different organizations. Like I think he has been the guest speaker for the NAACP and different chapters around Maryland and Virginia, in the area where he is. Yes. And I have four wonderful granddaughters. Three of them have finished college. I have one who's still in college, and they are doing interesting things. So, and one was a lawyer, a corporate lawyer for a few years. She didn't like it, and she became a school teacher. So,
Uh,
yeah.
uh,
But even when she was a lawyer, she was tutoring children in homeless shelters in LA. Uh, but but she much prefers teaching. And,
so,
and
Mildred,
yeah,
I always end by saying something, from the heart, and that is, Rhode Island is very lucky. I could name 25, I call them adopted citizens, and you're one of them, who show up here on their, with their, under their own speed. Children come because the parents bring them, and adults come because they bring their self, and sometimes in coalition, in your case with your husband. And then you come to a community and you are not shy about your involvements and your caring and your philanthropy. And being, we didn't get around to mentioning that you taught Black history, several times at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and at Brown University. You are a wonderful, wonderful person, and you have been wonderful for this community. I want to thank you for it. I don't have the authority or the power, but I'll do it anyway. I want to thank you for being adopted part of this community that really needs you.
well, thank you. And I have been the great beneficiary of many, many wonderful people in this community. And my neighbors have really looked out for me during this pandemic. So I really, I think it's a wonderful thing. I see some people that I'm sharing a course with, and people I'm learning from. Like we're looking at the life of Frederick Douglass, and so I'm learning from people all the time. And I just saw that Sylvia Ann Soares just put up a notice, and I think she is a wonderful treasure. There are just so many people who are fabulous contributors. And
Yes.
Rhode Island has such a astounding history. All kinds of things have happened in Rhode Island.
And you're one of them. Thank you very, 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 very much. And I want to thank all of our gatherers and listeners and sharers for their time and energy today. You will get this in the form of a link, hopefully in the next 3 or 4 days. And don't be shy about staying in touch. Goodbye, Mildred, for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.